Welcome back. You're tuned into Climate Clock on CNBC-TV18, and this is our special COP27 discussion that continues. We have with us Mr. Garg, Mr. Dasgupta, and Ms. Bhasin. Well, this next question is to you, Mr. Garg. Let me talk about the emissions report because it has just come ahead of COP27 and has spoken about some alarming signals as well. It talks about the fact that emissions are reducing, but efforts are still not sufficient to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. According to you, what should India do in this regard? Because India has been named one of the top countries to be, contributing to this particular emission target. We have made big announcements in the last COP. Do we need to rejig emission reduction goals of 45% by 2030, or these are enough? Or what else should India talk about in its NDCs?
Global emissions are 55 billion ton every year now. India's contribution is hardly 3 billion ton per year. So if somebody says that India is contributing too much, I will not agree. That is point number one. Number two, India's 45% of GHG upon GDP reduction in 2005 to 2030 is a very strong target, very ambitious target. 50% of an electric capacity coming from non-fossil sources is also a very, very steep target India has taken. So it is not that we have to be very more ambitious. We are already very, very ambitious. Now, what the world has to do, developed countries and some emerging economies have to do much more than what they have been doing. If 2050 is to be global net zero, and China has said 2060 is their net zero, India said 2070 is their net zero, then even a third standard student knows that net zero equal to net negative plus net positive. So if two big economies, what this emission gap report is saying, are not going to be net zero in 2050, then somebody has to be net negative in 2050, and we know whom we are talking about. They have to be net negative very, very strongly. They have to come out with their plans. If they are not coming out, the global commons, global environment has to lose. And to the last question on finance, I have two very simple solutions. Multilateral development banks have something called call-in capital. So call-in capital is what OECD countries give to them. Presently, about 9 big MDBs have call-in capital of $119 billion. And against this, they can raise callable capital, that is raise loans, blended finance, all those things. So if developed countries make this 119 to 200, they can raise around $1 trillion more, and that will be good enough every year for funding. So this is very much required. The third point and my last point is there has to be some projects that are green everywhere, whether in USA or Europe or China or India or India, they are green everywhere. So we have to be common green taxonomy. If we want to have common taxonomy, that is difficult. But common minimum ground taxonomy has to be decided all over the world, and they should be provided, run through low-cost green financing.
Okay.
I stop here.
So low-cost green financing, green taxonomy, certain things that need to be considered in this COP as well. Ms. Bhasin, let me come to you. We talk about climate finance, and of course a flow of sustainable finance is something that will help us keep up on the pledges that we have made, countries like India. Do you think if that doesn't flow through, because so far we have been doing it with internal accruals, it could actually hamper the progress that we've been making so far? And if not, what are the projects, what are the technologies do you think that we should be focusing on? This money that comes through, should it be used more on climate technologies, or there should be technology sharing as well?
So, Sona, I think there's a few things to bear in mind, and I think historical responsibility, I really want to reiterate that point, right? Because if you think about what was supposed to have happened by 2020, there were pledges that were made related to climate finance, but there were also significant pledges and commitments that were made relating to emissions reduction. And if you actually take out the economies in transition, which is essentially your erstwhile USSR, you find that the developed world actually reduced its emissions by less than 4% by 2020. So the level of ambition that is therefore thrust on countries like India is completely misguided and baseless. That's one point. The second point is that if we really are looking to multilateralism to be able to solve for the global common as well as the global challenge that climate change has put forth to all of us, I think recognizing that climate finance as well as technology cooperation as well as capacity building, an area that is actually often overlooked in the politicking. I think these are three very critical areas that need to be pushed forward as a collective if we are going to be able to really come out on the other side. To answer the counterfactual, and of course I do believe in multilateralism, which is why I do what I do, but the counterfactual question that you are posing, that what if this finance does not actually accrue, what happens then? I think it will be a scramble, the way that we are today, where there is an absolute level of mistrust as well as no sense of accountability in terms of what has been promised, what has been pledged versus what is actually being delivered on. I think we're just going to continue in this deadlock, and you'll see an increasing number of partnerships arising on the outside of what is considered COP today to be able to try and solve for it. You'll see greater technology partnerships as well as financing partnerships taking place amongst bilateral and multilateral countries, but we lose the essence of really coming together within the purview of the UNFCCC to solve for this global challenge.
Take your point, Ms. Bhasin. Short of time, so Mr. Dasgupta, last question to you. Your response to what I just asked Ms. Bhasin and your closing comments as well.
Yeah, we're trying to work towards a solution that is feasible. We think a solution is feasible. And I agree that what happens at COP is that you get very intense discussions which go to the edges and not solutions. And therefore, India in a G20 upcoming leadership, India as the biggest player in some senses amongst the developing countries, the challenges that they're going to be facing. India has the deep financial capabilities to be able to be a bridge between the divides that are affecting us. And I'm hopeful that we will see many more things happening, not perhaps at the kind of headline levels of the divisions that are always talked about, but working towards collaborative, cooperative outcomes. And it, by all means, it can take many shapes and forms. One of the things that's going to be important to discuss is the G7 Just Transition Energy Partnership. It's going to be important, but we've got to think of the multilateral solutions. We've got to think of the adaptation solutions. We've got to be doubling the adaptation size of financial resources. But all this happening at a time when we are in an energy sector crisis globally right now, and central banks are raising, even as we're talking today or tomorrow, we're going to see some actions again from the Fed on the central banks. So these are conditions which are going to be difficult. But within this, I remain optimistic that we will find the right solutions if we put our minds to it. Thanks.
Okay, that is everyone's hope as well. Thank you, Mr. Dasgupta, Mr. Garg and Ms. Bhasin to join us and discuss this important topic. Thanks a lot for joining us. And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of Climate Clock. News continues on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned.